Check 1, 2. Check, check, check. How's that sound? Everyone in the back here okay? Cool. I will hand over to Carlo McCormick.
Hey, hi everyone. When you can't do drugs anymore, you kind of just end up talking about them. And when you're doing drugs, you talk about them a lot too. So I thought this kind of uncommon ground is something we all have in common, no matter where we are on that spectrum between sobriety and intoxication. I'm Carlo, and I am joined up here by 4 remarkable authors of this of blurring books, pharmacopoeia of drug literature, ever expanding. What's next? Have we found another book for this series?
I'm actually looking for a collector of blotter acid, if anyone has any friends.
Well, there is Mark McLeod. Yeah.
Talk to me after, please.
Okay. I wanted to look at, so I can get everyone's title right. Let me do this. Okay, I'll start I'll kind of go down this way. This is Jacaber Castor, and your book is called Lost in Space. There are weed labels from the 80s. And then we have Michael Lorenzini, his book is called Every Pill I Took, 2000 to 2001. And then who's over there? Okay, we have Thatcher Keats, and his book is Branded Bronx Bags. Got that right? Yeah, Branded Bronx Bags. And Luis Bubko, Zazine, yes, which is contemporary weed marketing and that kind of great gold rush of shitty weed that hit the shops before they regulated it again. So I think that an easy way to kind of start this, I think the statute of limitations are off and laws have changed. I think we're all good with this. If anyone's uncomfortable, you can just tell me to fuck off. But I think maybe if everyone just briefly talks about how this collection came to be, in a more personal way, about the archive and and any self-incriminating things you want to add along the way. Let's start with Jacaber.
Hey. I'm very much not into self-incrimination, so I'm not sure about you, but you've made a living off of it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I was on the cover of High Times during the drug war, so I didn't care.
Right, but you had that. You had a certain protection of an amendment that addressed the High Times freedom of press. Other people were not in the same position, so I had to take it more seriously. It was illegal at the time, but I approached it from a artistic standpoint, having art gallery, and we were dealing with a lot of graphic arts and prints and things like that. So we had just put up a blotter acid exhibition, and I was doing a lot of thinking at that time about these things as series of art, all the little cool images on blotter acid that was around the late 70s to early 80s. What did it mean? How did it affect perception of the products? What was its ultimate purpose? Who were the people that made it, et cetera, et cetera. There's been a lot written about it since that time. But it and a sort of surreptitious discovery that Robert Williams, one of the artists we were handling, actually had made a really cool weed bag label in the 60s, stimulated me to think, well, I know all these cool artists and stuff. Why don't we do something about this for weed? Because there's no packaging, no art, no labeling whatsoever. So that's what got us started on the project that I documented in the book.
Great. Michael.
I kind of came to the rave scene late. I think it was 29 when I had someone handed me at a party half an ecstasy pill, and I was like, oh, okay, didn't even really look at it. And then it wasn't until a few months later that I think I bought my first pill from our mutual friend Kevin, who I met in your living room. So it's really, you took me down the dark path. If we're all going to get incriminated here, and I was like, oh, they have designs on them. Oh, that's really interesting. And by that time, I was starting to get into the club and rave scene, and I was trying to photograph for music magazines, and I was photographing. I really wanted to document the rave scene, and people were collecting flyers at that time, and other people were documenting rave scene. But I asked around. I said, "Is anybody documenting these? Like, is anybody documenting pills?" And nobody really seemed to be. Not in a like artistic way. Sometimes people would take photos of them just for identification. So I was like, okay. And once I started it, then everybody would just say, like, "Hey, I found a cool pill," you know, and so everyone sort of knew to, like, if they bought some interesting looking pill, to funnel one towards me. So yeah, I don't know. That's how it started. But then, you know, it was a whole setup to do this macro photography of them, and I did it for about 16 months, basically. So.
Okay, so I followed a woman up to the Bronx, from 78th Street up to Bainbridge and 204th, like Mosholu Parkway. And she was sort of foundational harm reduction gang, you know, so condoms, bleach kits, and needles, eventually needles and stuff like that. And I got mixed up with those folks, like adjacent. They had degrees, they were like medical people and stuff like that. And then I got some artist housing. DC Department of Cultural Affairs used to give out housing, and I ended up on the concourse on 167th Street during the crack epidemic, and it was like the apocalypse. And this girlfriend, Sin Stern, explained to me, like, this branding thing. And so the way it was is cocaine had brand names, and the names were about the high life, the good life, Gucci, White Wedding, stuff like that. And then heroin was all about trouble and death and danger and weapons. And it was also during the crack epidemic. So there was tons of these colored tops everywhere. Now, the colored tops were ubiquitous. I mean, they were everywhere. But they weren't decorative. But the bags were amazing and designed. So I started picking as many of them up as I can. And then I ended up with, I think, about 250 in this collection. And then talking with DB, we said, let's make a book. And I set about to photograph them. And I photographed them on red velvet, because the heroin high is often described as the red velvet embrace of your soul. All right, that's the story.
Hi. Wow, what a follow-up. I feel like that was a good ending to yours. As I'm sure it's a little more recent, so when weed was legalized in 2021, it seemed like suddenly every single deli turned into a smoke shop, and every corner there was like 4 new smoke shops called Zaza, Zazin, Zozo, Zaza, I felt like with these smoke shops came this new kind of renaissance of weed branding and packaging, where suddenly it seemed like no matter where you looked, you were seeing like these new bags everywhere, and they felt unprecedented for me in the sense that I hadn't ever seen like weed branded in a way that had nothing to do with weed whatsoever, and something to do with like sex or money or drugs. And now that I saw the Lost in Space 80s weed bags, I know that's not really the case, and there was like a more artistic, refined version that came before it. But during this time, it's just like it felt so like overwhelming, and you started to see everywhere how these bags were taking over, and they kind of took on a life of their own and a mythology, and you couldn't escape them. And at a certain point, I remember I was walking in Harlem one day, because I would just go for really long walks, and I saw this one bag that was like, it was a Megan Thee Stallion lookalike that was a stripper with money raining down, and I kind of looked at it and I was like, you know, I love these bags. I had been seeing them in the smoke shops. There was like one that sticks in my head called Pink Panties, and I was like, I wonder if that's indica or sativa. But I just picked it up and I said, you know what, like, fuck it, I'll make a book of it and I'll start collecting them. And it's interesting because there's a whole culture around it too. Like, I'm not the only person who kind of clocked this moment in time. So there's a bunch of different people doing this archivists and archiving of these bags. And yeah, it just felt like this weird period in New York City history where weed wasn't necessarily illegal, but there was this gray area with all these guerrilla smoke shops that kind of got away with doing this really interesting, like guerrilla art. And I felt like it wasn't going to last forever. It was only a matter of time until like more dispensaries started opening that were official. And of course, like the average person would probably rather go to a dispensary that has, guaranteed quality weed, except for like instead of mystery weed and, with really good bags. But yeah, it felt like an interesting moment. And you can see now how that kind of has already shifted into a different era. And we are it's still around, but there was a period that felt like very, very alive, for this new frontier and new medium almost.
Yeah, so that's great. Sorry to put you all through that, but I was kind of curious. Now, we're talking in a way about branding and products, much as we really are talking about drugs. And that's a particular language. And so, Thatcher, you got into a little bit when you were talking about the different ways in which the kind of the associations, because it tells us it tells us a little bit about the drug, but it also tells us a lot about the culture of the people who are doing the drug. So maybe if each of you can kind of, as you went through this and collected this stuff, what did you decode of the culture? What's the what's the sense of humor? What's all the different aspects they bring to it? Well, you were helping produce that, so.
Well, 100%. I mean, weed had no advertising associated with it for obvious reasons in the 80s. And the series from the book, it's all basically downtown New York City circulated weed labels. It wasn't like a national thing or anything. And so, I mean, stoners were extremely prevalent among the art people that I knew downtown. I mean, pretty much almost all downtown artists were fans of weed, and a lot of the people were in their 20s and 30s and 40s, and a lot of them came up liking the same kind of stuff, comic books and liking, weird fantasy stuff. And, even in the 80s, there was a lot of like graffiti writing going on, and pretty much whichever realm of youth art you looked at for probably the previous 20 years before that, it was stoners. And weed was actually like a fuel that people used for creativity. It was for playing music, for doing art. So there were a lot of tropes and a lot of sayings and little jokes. Stoners had their own little society. I mean, most people had a group of friends that they liked to get a buzz with, and there started off, I mean, not so much the 420 or whatever. That was a thing that started in High Times, I think. But there were lots of little catchphrases, different. I mean, just the names for weed alone over 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, when I was a really young kid, I don't know, people called it pot mostly. And then before that, it was gauge, and there was boo.
Yeah, but the thing is also, like, in a way, weed, even though it resisted some aspects of, why don't you keep passing that on? It resisted some aspects of branding. It always had that because we were always talking about which strain it was. So, or even before that, when people go like Acapulco Gold or whatever, all the way back, there was always that. And I did work at High Times, And we called it pot porn, the kind of the photos that, that people would really look at like they'd want to examine pornography, with that kind of really specific detail of like the hairs and the little crystals on there and stuff. So, pot always had it. It just didn't have the external packaging.
Well, it didn't have much of a star quality till High Times started doing centerfold buds in the very late 70s. I mean, early pot was pretty plain looking. It was actually leafy. Back in the 60s, it was like not too dramatic looking, and there wasn't too many brands either. You were basically getting Mexican or maybe Nam weed. Colombian would come in once in a blue moon.
Hawaii.
There was Thai, Hawaii, but that was pretty much it. It was mostly Colombian, and it would look like a brick of just, it was pretty funky looking. It wasn't like a lot to like, get excited about or whatever. So there was terminology though to keep your parents or keep the fuzz or whoever from understanding what people are talking about. And there was always these little familiar names like you would give one of your best friends or something. So there was a lot of terminology and stuff. So I mean, in the 80s when we were doing these, I was like art directing, and the people that did the labels were mostly downtown art directors and that sort of thing. I mean, Norman Gosney was he was doing a lot of club design, and then Flick Ford was one of your buddies at High Times, and Stan Moss was with Bomb Magazine, and so a lot of the people, Adam Alexander was kind of like a bit of a weed dealer and a mathematician who was doing graphic stuff. That guy Jerry was SBA grad, but I suggested as a sort of art director some of the phrases and titles and things, but we were trying to kind of run through a litany of some of the terminology that seemed like fertile for graphic translation, like little jokes and things that it was meant to entertain ourselves. It was meant to entertain other weed users, and it was like funny. It was like it's one of the prime things that
it is humor. Yeah.
Weed does. It makes a lot of
Cheech and Chong
ridiculous and stupid things seem funny.
Yeah. Michael, how about, because I remember ecstasy, before the pill press, and it was just a powder. You'd find some way to ingest.
Yeah. I mean, at that time period, at least in New York, most of the ecstasy that was being sold was coming out of Amsterdam. And, we didn't have fentanyl to worry about it those days, but, there was a lot of bogus pills and adulterated stuff. I think sometimes you hear stories, people would get DXM in their pills, which is dextromethorphan, which is like cough syrup. But if you mix that with ecstasy, like if you take two pills and one's DXM and one's ecstasy, you can have a really bad night, in fact, die. We would test our pills beforehand.
And you can see that in the book.
Yeah, like the cover image
no
of
pill is pristine.
Yeah,
check everyone.
The cover image of the smiley face, there's a corner broken off of it, so we'd scrape off a corner and test it. But which means you have to then find a way to smuggle it into the party. But we were creative that ways too. But the pill manufacturers, it wasn't good for them to have people. The legit ones it wasn't good for them to have people dying, so they would always brand their pills so that people know, like, oh, that's a good one, come back to that one. And, I don't know the history of why they started using corporate logos, but that was fascinating to me. I think at the time I had probably just read Naomi Klein's No Logo, and I was kind of, into this sort of like not wearing logos, even though in the rave scene, I think people did wear kind of a lot of like sports gear logo-y stuff, But I thought it was just really funny that, we were literally like, cramming corporate logos down our throat. But it's always like, they were always well-known brands and colors. I mean, if you look at the book, it's actually arranged alphabetically. It's almost like a product catalog. So it goes from Adidas to Omega, but it's like, Adidas, Bacardi.
It's really corporate culture, a lot of it. Like
Mitsubishi's and Mercedes and Michelin.
And I think about like actually in heroin bags in like Manhattan, there was like Dom Perignon. There was like that kind of a weird, like, is it aspirational culture? Is it like a kind of the the thing where you start identifying with the people who are abusing you? I mean, I had no idea where that corporate thing came from. The irony.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm sure there's a bit of irony about it, but there were like ones that would come out that were special. Like one of the ones in there has an elephant on it, and that was called the Republican, and it came out for the election. So, so like like they would latch on to things that were happening too.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I always thought that. And anyone can respond to this, but like I remember, like because it was the LSD blotter acid, which was really to me the first kind of sui generis development of this visual language, of this lexicography with this stuff, and that somehow, if it was Mickey Mouse or if it was whatever, pyramid or whatever, it would or the Eye of Horus, that somehow that would inform your trip in some way, which of course is like really like that's you might as well be buying Captain Crunch cereal if you're that stupid, but it works somehow. And I don't know, what did you think for the heroin bags had a lot of
Well, it's am I on? No, I'm on. Hold it. Am I on? Okay. So it's funny you guys talking about this corporate thing, because my experience in the Bronx was that the corporate stuff I would only ever see for the cocaine bags. That was my understanding. It's funny talking about the acid. Like when I was a teenager, we had Mickey Mouse, Fantasia, Blue Dragon. I think we're not admitting to crimes, but I could imagine someone not dissimilar to myself, perhaps in northern Jersey, selling some LSD that had a really beautiful tantric symbol and was like sort of a gourmet LSD. And that was my earliest indication of this branding and the secret messaging that I really loved. But then what was so cool as I came to understand this, and then a lot of it was research after the fact, but this Bronx stuff was all just the darkest stuff. You'll see in the book, toe tag, body bag, checkmate, final ending, stuff like that.
I mean, in New York we had like poison and toilet.
Poison.
It was really high on glamour.
Yeah, I mean, there's also a Saddam Hussein and a Donald J. Trump, and
Talk
what
about bad dope.
Well, yeah, but what when the dope was supposedly strong, everyone would rush to it. So that's my understanding, is that's why they had branding. So the dealers would try to say, I've got my toe tag brand. So everyone would search for toe tag. And then in my collection, I'll have like, I think it's 4 or 5 different New Jack Cities and 4 or 5 different checkmates. Because what Sin has explained to me is that people would then try to piggyback on a brand with a good reputation, would come in with something not as good, but put the same brand name. So you'll see these slight variations. Like the New Jack City was always a skyline, but you'll see these variations in the skyline. So,
yeah, and well, I mean, part of that is that it's like that word of mouth thing, because junkies cop and junkies talk. So they're always like, this is really good right now. Like, someone died from it, let me get 3. It's like, that must be really strong. So I think that was part of how the branding worked that way. Word of mouth, obviously.
but in that harm reduction community, the rap was. You're wrong. It's on. Okay, there it is. The rap with that gang, and some of those people were doctors and, had degrees and stuff like that. It's like when people died, it's not strong. There's something wrong with it. Because junkies taking stuff that's twice as strong because of the endoplasmic reticulum, which is this thing where you can take more, twice as much the next day and not die. There's something got to be wrong with it. So these were, I guess, the earliest days of fentanyl, and stuff like that. And so when people died, like the Philip Seymour
Well, yeah,
Hoffman
there was
day,
bad cuts all the time.
bad
Rat poison was
cuts
what everyone worried
and
back
rat
before
poison and
fentanyl.
stuff like that. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just curious for you what you thought, Louis, because I kind of felt that that most of these brands, most of this visual language that accompanied the drugs, were being done by people who were part of that culture. I actually felt by the time we got to that Wild West weed shit that those people were not, they really weren't fucking stoners. They were just hoodlums.
I would agree with that. I think that what I noticed is that it seemed like a lot of people were just throwing a bunch of shit at the wall and seeing what stuck, and then from there it would like kind of get a little like it didn't feel as artistically inspired, more indicative of culture now. Like I think we've just gotten more brand obsessed and more like it seems mass produced and kind of more of a soulless version of this stuff, and it is hard to clock kind of I would say that if there's any overarching theme of these bags, I used to say they're kind of like Axe body spray commercials where they're like very masculine and sort of like tawdry and a little little trashy in a good way though, and I think that they are like less to do with any real inspiration and more to do with the mass production of like what could be cool. So it could be political or social or fashion or music or pop culture, and it doesn't seem to be really much to do with the weed itself, but it doesn't feel to me anymore, except some things like this where you would get like an Ocean's Gate weed bag that happened right after the tragic death of like 6 people in a tourism submarine accident, and you kind of be like, oh, okay, well, they're very, very up to date with all of it, and it was quick too. So it was in. I have that one. Yeah, this is a good one. It was interesting to see what was informing the bags, but it did feel like a little bit more. Everything, everywhere, all at once. Just anything that would
kind
stay.
of like AI slop now.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
kind of indicative of where we're at in culture and stuff like that. Kind of just like, what can you do? Like, how fast can you do it, and what works? I don't think it's. I don't think like.
It wasn't tortured that way.
Yeah.
DB, do you want to jump in for a minute and talk a little bit about this series and how it kind of came together and like, why you actually thought we needed these books?
Well, yet again, you're responsible, actually, Carlo. You approached me when I just started blurring books and said, do you know about Michael's pill collection of photographs? And I said, no.
Yeah, actually, I think we ran into each other at a gallery opening, and you're like, oh, Michael's...
Yeah, so you introduced me to Michael, and, I have... I'm a naturally very, very curious person, and I'm also a hoarder, a collector, and an archivist. And
Fetishist.
Yes. So this appealed to me on a bunch of different levels. And once we'd done Michael's book, Thatcher approached me, or I approached you. I don't remember which way around it was. You approached me. And of course, and then it seemed like, oh, this is like a thing. This is an interesting subculture. 1, 2. Let's keep going. So, my hope is, I didn't know about the cocaine bags till you guys just mentioned that. I wonder if anybody has any of that from the 80s, because I've never even heard that there were sort of champagnes in cocaine bags.
Yeah, the glassine envelope thing, yes. I mean, I think Coke's so cheap now, no one does like small things anymore.
Right, but it is an interesting, moment in
yeah.
time. That's the fascinating thing. All of these things come and go, right? Culture moves on, drugs move on, the branding of it moves on. So that's why I'm interested in sort of...
And actually in terms of those little crack vial things that you were talking about, Thatcher, Annabelle, you'll remember this woman's name. She died. She was Philip Glass's wife. Candy. She made all this amazing art out of all the crack vials that she found on the street. And it was like, it's really great work. but that's more like an artistic mediation of it. It's not inherently beautiful form. What, sorry, this is how it goes. I mean, I think about this stuff because I also I collect images, and I have a just massive file on basically the art of intoxication, and that goes through all the way cigarettes and all the medicines like morphine and heroin and amphetamines all had commercial things. Coca-Cola, the early stuff like that, which had Coke in it. So it's really we can say that as an animal, the one thing that's hardwired into humans and a lot of other animals is an actual drive towards intoxication. That lots of animals, they can find the berry that gets them sideways, they'll eat it again and again. And so that I think that's part of the language that's going on. Should we open it up to some questions? Is that good? You guys have questions? I'm sure you must. And if not, we'll just keep going. Go ahead. Yeah, you go. Sorry.
I was really holding my phone. This is a question for you in a Dare hoodie. What was your favorite ecstasy pill?
What was the question?
The question was, what was my favorite pill? You never forget your first time, but the first one was an Igloo that I remember. The first one I actually had before that, I don't even know what it was. What was the best one? I don't know. There were a lot of good ones. I don't know. So many good times. I remember more like the parties and that were the best ones. I can tell you that smiley face on the cover was a shit pill. Those were super weak. But the Mitsubishis were good, but those were not the first. Mitsubishis were legendary, but that was not the first round of Mitsubishis. It was there were successive rounds of Mitsubishis. So. Yeah. And if were they as good as the first one? I don't know. I remember the Pikachu one being very powerful, even though it's small, and it's very well pressed. That's a very that's the kind of next level up in terms of pill presses. But
Did the imagery change when, for instance, basically it was British mobsters who took over the production of them? Did they have different images on their pill presses? Did you notice that?
I don't know. I think it was still all it was. You still mostly were getting a lot of automotive or clothing brands, things like that. The funny thing, I because of this, I met a guy who's been photographing current pills, Dutch pills, and they are so super manufactured now. The very tightly packed pills with these very now they're almost never circular. They're always kind of the shape of some cartoon character or something. And he's been documenting the fact that the manufacturers actually will subtly change them on all these different things. So it'll be slightly different green or slightly different, color, or sometimes they'll have one color in the front and one color on the back. So they're getting they're getting very tricky to differentiate their products.
To prevent counterfeiting?
I think so, yeah.
Interesting. They'll all be holograms someday. Does it occur to you guys that because what we're talking about are ephemeral phenomena, and then we're also talking about a kind of psychoactive experience that is inherently ephemeral, right? So we're dealing with two different kinds of things that exist briefly in time, and then we're talking about that the package, that the delivery system is the only thing that we can hold on to. Is that something that you thought about when you were trying to preserve this stuff?
thought it was really interesting for all these books that they kind of tell the story of where culture is at, and through something kind of more taboo. And I found that interesting that via this thing that maybe is seen like a little bit more in a taboo sense, there is a story being told that's maybe more honest than like any history book would say, because it's not bounded by typical moral, ethical, whatever bullshit that you find. So I during what I was doing, even if it was like very broad ranging for the weed bags, and it kind of touched on everything, it was interesting to see, like in the weed bags themselves, you would see certain trends, like there would be denim tears jeans, or like an Ice Spice bag, and that really does tell the story of like 2021, 2022 in a way that in 10 years you're going to look back and be like, oh shit, like, oh my god, remember when everyone was in denim tears, or remember when everyone was listening to Ice Spice or Sexy Red, or when Ocean's Gate imploded, you know, like, so there is something interesting about these mediums of like the black market being mementos for the future, you know?
I find it's pretty interesting, the contrast between the weed labels of the period that you covered and the weed labels of the period I covered. Back then, it was a marginalized group of people. It was illegal, and it was like a fantasy. The idea of like, oh, let's make a brand. It was like a parody of corporate life. It was it was like a rejection of capitalism, because we were marginalized and we weren't accepted, and it was illegal. So there's a sort of an anger and a disregard for capitalism, and you know, a lot of the stuff back then was indicative of the complex that you would be put into being like doing something that you liked that seemed pretty normal, but it was, you know, so I'm kind of proud that there were some political cartoons and stuff like attacking Nixon and attacking Reagan, and you know, it was, but the whole idea of making a brand and looking corporate was total irony and total, like, you know, like as if, like, totally. Like this could ever happen. There'll be a brand someday of like weed, you know?
For sure.
You know,
like
and then 30 years later, it's like you can be like a, you know, YouTube channel or, you know, Mike whatever, Tyson Instagram, like the latest thing just happened yesterday. You can just have it like, oh, ask AI, like, oh yeah, make me a cool psychedelic label of some event that just happened tomorrow, and boom, boom, boom. It's such a contrast. And
and it's interesting too, because when I look at your book, it's similar themes, but in this way that is more tongue in cheek and a little more realized and a little more of like a fuck you to all of the capitalist corporate bullshit that does surround it. But it's funny how it has become in this way just like another branding moment and tool, and in a little less of a statement itself, and a more using moments from pop culture or things that feel relevant to sell a product that has like kind of nothing to do with the weed itself, you know? Like it's interesting. But it's funny too, because the bags do like little political things. There's a funny one that I have that's like Nancy Pelosi, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, all walking with walkers in a race called the New Yorker, and it's so there are ones that have a little bit more of like this. I think there are in the midst of all of the noise of them, because I feel like there's millions and millions of them, and you never see the same one twice. There are every so often these ones that do touch on it in a more of a, you know, tongue-in-cheek sense, but satirical, but...
Yeah, I was
just going to ask, do you know where these bags are produced? Are they produced in New York, or are they...
Well, it is. I was just talking to Zach Sokol in the audience, who was telling me that in Los Angeles, there's a place that does, when a bag goes, when a bag kind of catches wind that it's a cool one, there's somewhere in downtown Los Angeles that will mass produce them and send them out throughout the country. But also there's a lot of them that come, you know, from China, Alibaba. Thank you, Zach, for letting me know the origins. This is something I just found out too, because it was always a mystery. I'm like, where the fuck do they come from? I mean, it's like really, it's sort of like they rain from the sky, but that's not the case. Yeah, so there's an industry.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you just compare these kind of four delivery systems, so to speak, it's like there's differences in medium and materiality, and really what it is it's the evolution of DIY technology. So we start with a Xerox machine, and then we've got rubber stamps for the glassine envelopes. Was the next kind of, or whatever, concurrent, and then we have pill presses, and now we've got like basically desktop publishing, computer work, right, AI and whatever. So it is kind of it's if you really want to get in the weeds, like the way art directors talk and stuff, there's a whole other layer of information going on here. Do we have some more questions, maybe? How are we doing?
Here's one.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question. So I think it's really interesting how we're talking about these as art objects and ephemera, but the artist is almost totally removed because they're anonymous, because they're working on, an illicit product. Curious if any of you spoke to the actual design. It sounds like you in the 80s, you were designing bags yourself. I'm curious if any of the artists wanted to be known outside of maybe working for, say, a delivery service or a dealer syndicate. Did anyone want their name to be memorized for designing?
At the time, no.
Yeah, I mean,
now they're thrilled.
It was complicated. I mean, your artist pool. I mean, these are people who worked at High Times and Screw magazine and things like that. So they already were dealing with a pretty tarnished image. So I think that they were always like, "Oh, you just write for us because you think it looks funny on your resume," and it's like, because you write for Art Forum, and then you could do these magazines. So they were all like, a lot of them had a chip on their shoulder about like their kind of career choices. I always thought, but the guy who's really done the major collecting research of blotter acid did go, in fact, in because he's really rescuing this stuff from history. He did talk to basically all the people about how they made them, because it was like really, it's like photo stats. It's really old school kind of shit, and how to make your own perfing machines, and then their choice of images. So they did the research. I don't know. I think the rest is pretty anonymous.
Yeah, I don't know the answer. I mean, except for what you just told me. There is, since there's so much noise, it is a broad, expansive thing. There's like certain ones that I think of that I'm like, there's no way that this came from like the mass-produced sort of like world of Alibaba or whatever. Like I think of one, it's like these Art Deco bags that I found in Greenpoint, and I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel like the rest of the like sort of El Chapo, like horny bitch, like whatever weed, It's like, this one feels very tasteful and refined, and I'm like, who made the Art Deco fox, and that feels to me like it could be somebody who is, but there's been rumors when I did release the book, there were certain people like, oh, I know somebody who makes these bags, and I was like, oh, well, who? And I don't know if they ever give me an answer, but there must be someone making some, but there are definitely, it's a mystery.
I mean, yeah. Oh, sorry. You want?
What about the gummy containers these days? They're so tasteful and bougie. Like, this is a wellness drug.
Right. That's a whole other culture gets in there. Yeah.
It's like triple packaging.
Very elegant, and yeah.
Like really paying for that packaging.
Yeah. When you get into the more like,
Open half of it.
yeah, no, they're very, very high tech too. I feel like when you're getting into the more commercial space and like those ones that are more that you see that like from the dispensary, like those ones like I feel like they feel more like traditional marketing, more capitalist, or not capitalist, that's the wrong, corporate, but they're a little bit more like ascribing to like creating a product and like letting it out, but it is this more elevated, very yeah, I'm like, does it get you high or not? Yeah. But like, it's funny to see the difference between two, like a weed that's sanctioned and it's coming from like a proper dispensary, and the gummies and things like that, and how it's become this sort of, it's a product, you know what I mean? And there's money behind it and stuff like that, versus the ones that like, I don't even like, I mean, you can find gummy bags with the ones that are more in the black market, but those are similar to like the, like cream pie, cream puff, like, pink panties, that sort of vibe. Yeah, but it is interesting to see how elevated those have gotten since weed was legalized. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, where are the gummies?
I hear there's someone I keep missing. Who is it who wanted to
I
ask a
don't
question?
know
Would you
who-
please? Sorry, I didn't see it.
for the weed gentleman, which is like, if you go to a grocery store today, you'll see that like all the brands are getting like yossified, and they're like starting to like look a certain kind of like graphic design level of like a consumer packaged good. I was wondering, like, where do you think the future of weed design is headed? And if you think it'll ever kind of end up there where it's like this sort of elite packaging?
Me?
Yeah, either one of you.
Maybe.
I mean, you're probably more of an expert on it, but I feel like it's going the way of all advertising. Every product and everything from, I mean, social media influencers are now our politicians. You know, advertising, it doesn't matter what the product it is, you are the product. So I think it's all going to just be going a crazy, sophisticated and into your brain, you know, as far as people can take it.
Yeah, and I agree. I feel like it becomes this sort of, things don't even have like it almost like lacks a spirit in a sense, where you're sort of looking at these things and it's like, oh, is this like a clothing brand or is this a weed brand? It all kind of similar fonts and these sort of like cloudy vibes. And there's a lot of things, it's almost like it ascribes to like a larger aesthetic identity that is beyond the product itself, but more to do with, you know, like, something that's like earthy, crunchy, or something that's sort of like new wave techy, like so it seems like the evolution of weed that is not on the black market is getting more and more sanitized and becoming a part of this broader sort of like just like advertising, like anything, you know what I mean? So it is interesting to see how that's.
I wonder if there'll be a counter movement, you know, like the gray market weed.
Well, my prediction is that it's all going to hit cross branding, so that now when you get Pikachu, it's actually going to be done by the people who do Pokemon, and like you'll get your Hello Kitty, it's like that's the only way to go.
I was just going to say that I think one of the things that we were talking about the level of detail that goes into pills now. I think part of that is not just for counterfeiting, but it's also to show that like if you get something that looks like it's like there's been a lot of manufacturing made into it, maybe you think it's safer. Like, oh, okay, this looks like, you know, a legit thing and not something somebody made in their kitchen, right? But I think it's this. Yeah, but I think it's the same thing with with weed now too. Is like you go to these stores, it's like, oh my god, look at all the thought that they put into the packaging and the design and and then you smoke it and you're like, man, that's kind of shit weed, you know. So. You're paying a lot of times for the packaging and not the
And this
product.
is why DB is eventually going to be doing these as leather-bound books, gold embossed, so we know it's a really good high. And speaking of that, he would like me to remind you that all these books back here are for sale, and you can get them autographed by, if they're willing to put their name to it, by the authors. And so. And we're all hanging out for a bit, so we can keep on asking questions with us then. Is that all right? Yeah. So, the book's here. Thanks, everyone.